5 times 5 nations. In at least 5 different rabbinic locations, a story is told about how God gave the Torah to the Israelites. We were not the first nation that God asked. In fact, in various iterations of this midrash, this rabbinic story, the Torah is offered to 4 other nations, and each, for their own reason, refuses, before finally the Israelites accept. God had to contact every member who would ever live of each nation and find out whether or not they were on board. Apparently, God has quite the calling house. Hello. My name is I Will Be. As I Will Be. I'm calling for Mountain Sinai research. As a member of the Edomite, Moabite, Ammonite, Ishmaelite, or Israelite nation, I would like to ask you some questions concerning issues facing your nation, your God, and your identity. I am not selling anything, and I will not ask you for a donation. I may, however, demand your eternal servitude and acceptance as your Lord. I know it's a long way off, but thinking about the end of time, would you rather have Armageddon clearly spelled out and know precisely what to expect, or know absolutely nothing about the end of times and measure your life by your ability to infuse it with meaning right now, so that every moment has the possibility of holiness? Generally speaking, do you think that this world is ultimately moving towards justice? Or do you feel things have gotten pretty seriously on the wrong track? Who do you blame for that? Me? Or you? Now, I am going to read a list of words and phrases, and I want you to tell me whether, in your opinion, it describes God very well, not too well, or not well at all. Transparent, unknowable, just, unforgiving, merciful, weak, concise, long-winded, clear, logical, unknowable, relatable, out of touch. Next, I am going to read you some pairs of statements. After I read both statements, please tell me whether the first statement or the second statement comes closer to your own view, even if neither is exactly right. When you hear of a new law, custom, or legal decision, are you committed to following it sight unseen? Or do you mock it, use it as fodder for late-night humor? Because ultimately Torah is a shared cultural language whose references are as clear to you as they were to Moses. When told not to mix meat and milk, are you going to throw up your hands at the thought of abandoning chicken parm grinders? Or are you going to proclaim my people will spend the next thousands of years arguing about local VOD's politics, two-table systems, nullifying in 1/60th, dish storage, and no teen tom leaf gone? Why would anyone erase that as a topic of conversation? When 6 million of your people get destroyed, are you going to rail against God, rail against the Goyim, rail against people who claim that you have privilege, go off the rails, or marvel in the amazing feat of your own existence? When it becomes clear to you that your sacred text is a forgery, written and rewritten by differing political interests, do you care? Does that force you to abandon your religiosity? Or do you accept that empowering humans to judge their own morality demonstrates divine faith and humanity? Do you want to live a perfectly just, moral, ethical life without having to think about it? Or do you want to make your own decisions, holding responsibilities for failures, and earning rewards for your successes, knowing that you are imperfect? Finally, a few questions for statistical purposes. Generally speaking, do you think of yourself as Ashkenazi, BT, Hasidic, Haredi, conservative convert, cultural FFB, Chavurah, humanist, independent, intermarried, intramarried, extramarried, in-married, ex-married, pre-married, anti-married, modern O, open O, post-D, recon, reform, renewal, Sephardi, Taimani, traditional, trans, denom, once, twice, 20 times a year, Zionist, anti-Zionist, non-Zionist, post-Zionist, practicing, non-practicing, perfecting, as if you could reduce the covenant that is in your flesh to a check mark in a box. Are you prepared to acknowledge your presence in this survey, despite not living in the time and place when it was offered? Fine, I'll do it. But only because I can't stand